So Wonder Woman, the first thing that I guess we should touch on is the fact that we finally have a good DC movie since the extended universe started.
Oh.
It feels like it's been so long.
I know. I feel so bad for them. It took them so long.
Yeah. This is their, they had Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad. It took them 4 shots. 4 shots to land one, and that is not good.
Which, Batman v Superman, I didn't even take the time to watch because I heard such awful things about it.
You are so lucky. So lucky.
That's what everybody says. They're like, just don't do it. Just don't ruin your life. And so I don't watch it. Suicide Squad, yeah, no. And very much like Man of Steel, very deja vu when watching Wonder Woman. It felt like there was a lot of like homages to Man of Steel and to Superman. It felt very much like, because I mean they have similar stories,
sure,
similar backstories, so it felt very very Superman-y when I was watching it.
I noticed a lot of things in general that Wonder Woman pulled influences from other movies, largely Captain America: The First Avenger, not just because it was a period piece, but assembling like the brigade and stuff was it all felt exactly like the Howling Commandos.
Yeah, it does feel very that way. And like Indiana Jones, I felt it was very Indiana Jonesy, and like Steve Trevor and his character, very much so.
Chris Pine actually talked about being influenced by Indiana Jones to play Steve Trevor. He actually like in the punch he throws in London in the alley, he does like the handshake that Indy does in his movie. He was like, I pulled that directly from Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I think I read a few because I've been just obsessed with it ever since it came out and just kind of interested in what people are saying about it. And a few of the scenes, the major scenes, especially when he flirts with Dr. Poison, he pulls those major influences, I guess, from Indiana Jones, which I think it worked really well.
Absolutely.
And it didn't feel like a ripoff.
No.
So it felt very, very authentic. I loved it.
So before we get too deep into the movie, I'm curious what your personal history and attachment to Wonder Woman is.
Okay. I mean, obviously, you know that I talk about just feminism quite often on my stream and in my Discord with my community, and you know how important it is to me. I have kind of followed the comic, the New 52, since it came out about 2 years ago. So that's been my main obsession with Wonder Woman, but it's always been throughout growing up. It's been a major symbol of just strong women because I didn't really see a lot of that as a child, especially playing video games. It was just kind of a back burner figure that I always kind of referenced myself to.
Sure.
Of course, it was all over media. It's on my mug. I had like a T-shirt and didn't even know who she was when I was a kid. So I kind of always was influenced by her, but until I got older, didn't really read any of the comics or know what it was about. So I would say my major influence right now is the New 52, the newest series. And it's such a dark series, and to see it kind of be played into the film was incredibly refreshing and satisfying.
Yeah. It was important for me personally to have a woman on this podcast with me for this particular episode because as much as I enjoy the character and I do have an attachment to it just as a fan, I am not going to ever have that gender attachment to it. So it is different for me. I'm not going to pretend like that's not something that's prominent with it.
Right. And I think that is probably the biggest thing that was for me too, is that she is one of the most well-known symbols in comic book world. And it being, you know, a male-dominated industry, she is the most well-known, and she's been, you know, everything throughout the history since the 40s, since she's come to being. She's been a symbol of, you know, strength. She's been a sex symbol. She's been everything. And I think to see that transform with the feminist movement has been really really transformative for me to kind of to go back, and now that the films come out, and to go read into like what she's done throughout history, just being Wonder Woman and being a figure for people, it's really special. I think it's a lot different than a lot of other comic book heroes.
One of the things that's kind of changed along with Wonder Woman over time too is her outfit. There's been outrage as to like how little she wears or when she puts on too much. I personally, I know I'm in the minority here. I loved when they put pants on her.
Yeah, no, totally.
I loved it. And people thought it was weird. They were like, you're going against like her normal thing. Like I liked the almost kind of black biker jacket that she had on, and Jim Lee had done that whole redesign, and that's still my favorite Wonder Woman costume.
Yeah, I agree.
There has been some heat as to her wearing a skirt in this.
Yeah,
I think they're getting awfully nitpicky.
Yeah, totally. And I think that kind of plays true to like it being a female superhero. Of course, that's what they're going to focus on. Why is that even like an issue? Like,
absolutely.
Why are we talking about that? No, I asked a few of my friends that have kind of followed the series as well. One of them being a guy that he specifically was really angry about the costume choice as well. And his first thing was, her boobs weren't big enough. And yeah,
that's the criticism.
Like,
It's one thing if you're like, she's her body type. Like I heard the not as muscular thing, which I get to an extent because it's a comic book thing, I think, more than a gender thing. But I've also always been curious why Superman is this big muscular guy when what is he doing to actually work out and maintain his muscle mass? He can lift anything. So would he not have like this killer dad bod? Like it makes sense that she's not going to be
working out.
Yeah.
No, and that's something when I first saw the stills for her and her costume like 3 years ago when they started leaking everything and they said that Gal was going to be, is it Gal or Gal?
Gal Gadot.
Gadot. Gal Gadot. Okay. I've heard so many different pronunciations over the past 2 weeks. It's so bad. I feel bad for her. But essentially it came out like 3 years ago and it was the costume that she's wearing now. I think a little bit different. And she was a lot thinner than I was expecting. And in the New 52, the one that it's mostly based upon, the muscle definition is a lot more prevalent, which was really, when I first started reading it, I was like, yes, of course. Like, why would she be this stick figure kind of woman, which I'm kind of hitting myself on the hand now because, strength doesn't necessarily have to relate directly towards muscle. And I think now that I've seen the film twice, it's very clear that that's not something that I needed. I didn't need her to be this big, brawny, muscly woman to kind of represent strength. And I'm glad that now that it's out, I think if you go see the film, it translates. Like it's not something that's as big of an issue as you would think it would be.
And from a comic logic perspective, her powers are magical anyway.
Yeah, she's a demi-goddess. Like she doesn't need a six-pack. But she's still, I would say it's very clear that the actress, she works out.
Oh, absolutely.
You can still see the definition in the film. And like she's got muscles in her legs, she's got muscles in her arms. So when she does those scenes, it's very clear that, she paid attention. She was doing her job.
Yeah.
So that wasn't near of an issue, I think, for me once I finally watched the film.
So let's get into the film then. What were some of the standout scenes for you? What are things that were?
Oh my gosh, there were so many. So we were talking a little bit beforehand, but when I first went to go see it, the first night, I think it was the Thursday night before it came out, I was really hyped about it. I was so ready for it to be awful. I really had zero faith. I was really, really nervous because it does mean so much to me. So I was pretty positive that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be. And I came out of it with it was great, but also so many things about it that I didn't like. And I took my niece to go see it last week. And that was such a different experience. The theater was still packed, by the way. It was out for a whole week and the theater was still packed, which I was very, very happy about. But it was a lot different experience for me. And I think the major points of it is how, for me, just watching it, was how inclusive the film was. Not just on a woman's standpoint, but just representing a lot of different cultures, especially from that time period. I think a lot of people's arguments about World War I and World War II are that, it was kind of a white man's story. And I think we all know that that's not the case. And they represented a lot of different stories, which was really beautiful for me. But yeah, and then I think the dynamic between Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman, I hated the first time when I watched it. And we talked a little bit about that on my stream.
We did.
I was telling you how angry I was that they had this romance because it's not that elaborate in the comics.
Good. I'm glad you're bringing this up because this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about.
And it's another thing that now that I've seen it for the second time, I'm kind of going back and I'm hitting myself on the hand for. Because I think I have my own bias. I mean, I'm a part of the LGBT community, so I have my own lens that I look through when I watch these films. I have my rolling of the eyes every time I see a heteronormative relationship in Hollywood because it's constantly there, especially in comic books. But now when I look at it for what it's worth, I can look at it and see that it was a healthy relationship. A relationship that a lot of people are looking at now and saying, wow, this is like ideal. They were very equal. She protected him, he protected her. They had their bits of learning from each other, which was really beautiful. Which in most comic book movies, you see the guy's leading and he's protecting the woman. It felt very like Lois Lane kind of switched around. He was Lois Lane, she was like the main figure leading him through the entire scene. Which was really refreshing.
One of the things I found interesting, and in a lot of movies this actually bothers me, and there was a specific moment in The Force Awakens that kind of relates to this. So there's a couple parts in the movie where Steve grabs Diana by the hand and leads her somewhere. But it's in a lot of action movies that's like, I'm gonna have to protect you now, and it's like the male instinct, and they don't shy away from that in this, even though Diana is way more powerful than Steve is, and she should be the one leading him around. The gender roles, especially in that period of time, and the fact that I don't feel he's doing it because he's a male and she's a female. He's doing it because he's an adult familiar with this world, and she's just like naive, innocent.
And he knows. He knows she knows nothing. No, I agree. I think that was beautiful. They didn't try to fight they didn't try to make it a feminist movie. Which is what I love. And I think there was a lot of weight on that from a lot of different people, because in the end, it ended up being that, but doing it in the right way, naturally, organically. It wasn't about a female superhero. It was just about a superhero.
Which is so important.
So important. And I think just walking away with that was all I wanted. And that's what happened. She ended up being... It was just so beautifully done. It's probably, in my opinion, like the top of all of the superhero movies that have come out, both Marvel and DC.
Wow.
They just executed it so well, and especially with that relationship. He would lead her into the alley like, hey, come on, follow me. Why are we hiding? Why are we hiding? And she ends up, saving him from all of the gunshots. And that was kind of the give and take on each scene, that they had a major action moment. He would do his part and she would do hers, and you rarely see that.
The whole sequence of them being on the boat, leaving Themyscira, and then being in London. That's a
beautiful scene.
That whole sequence is maybe my favorite part of the movie, because we really get to see Diana. She's almost childlike in her naivete. Where like I said that word weird, naivete, to where I'm trying to be fancy with big words and stuff. But she's very much like an innocent and doesn't feel constrained by all the societal norms that other people.
I love that.
And that was amazing. And it's one of the kind of endearing things about her character is the fact that she's so unjaded. And even by the end of the movie, she's like, I've seen this stuff and I've been through all this. And yet still, I'm this beacon of hope and love. And that is Wonder Woman. That's what she stands for.
Yeah, love and compassion.
Yeah, so it was amazing to see that kind of endure throughout.
Absolutely. And you talked about the boat scene, which is probably, I would say, hands down, one of my favorite scenes as well, when they're traveling from Themyscira back to London, to the front of the war. And that kind of comedy and that playful banter that they both had together was so absolutely needed for the build-up, in my opinion, for the build-up to the climax of the film, to kind of understand their dynamic, for it to be believable. Chris Pine did an amazing job. I think they honestly both did an incredible job at making it natural and organic. And I think that scene, I think I read somewhere that it was improv.
Really?
They were talking about just sexuality and sex, and whether or not she knew anything about, the male anatomy, or, how you procreate. And that, it was just killer. The line where they're talking about having babies, and she essentially says, men aren't necessary for pleasure, was hilarious.
It was so funny.
It was a great, because I kind of gave, when I first saw the film, I gave a lot of hell for the bath scene where he's getting out and he makes basically a dick joke.
Like 3 of them.
Yeah. Like really, I hard eye rolled in that scene.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was necessary. But the second time watching it, I think her joke on the boat, it kind of equals it. It's another play on the give and take. she balances it eventually every time, and it's just so appreciated. I think that's kind of the beauty too when you look at the production and who produced the film, and you look at Patty Jenkins. She was the director, but also she was like working with a team of male writers, and you kind of see that balance and how important that is, and having those lenses, especially when producing a film for the first time that people have been asking for decades. I think they ultimately provided something really, really special with that.
Yeah, I've heard.
Interesting to see what if a very popular male director, directed it, if that would have had any difference.
I think almost every movie nowadays, you need the balance of, especially if you're representing both genders as prominently, like both Diana and Steve were almost co-headliners for a lot of this. It's hard to kind of separate one from the other because they were together almost the entire movie. Yeah. So if you're going to do that, one would be like, oh, of course Wonder Woman was written by a woman because the women are represented so well in this. But it's important to have both perspectives. So you had a female director, you had male writers. If a male directed it, I would have expected some female writers in the writer's room just to kind of offset the same way Diana and Steve offset each other.
Absolutely. And I hope that this show represents, now that it's kind of come out and it's been such a raging hit and everybody loves it, both male, female, any gender in between alike, they've all really, really enjoyed it. I hope that represents to Hollywood, we can do this. Like, women can direct major films, we can do major, especially comic-based films. I hope that really, really shines through because it was really good. Really
One of the most important things that I've heard about this, what this movie is doing, is not only is it a major action movie led by a female lead, but it's also a major action movie with a female lead that's not overly prominent until she became Wonder Woman. Like, her biggest credit before this was Fast and the Furious. Yeah. And she's not a major role in those movies.
And she's mostly known for being a model. And she's Israeli, and she has an accent. So, like, all of these things, like, you're bringing in so many new nuances into Hollywood that we haven't really seen. And it's made a lot of people angry, but I think it's, like I've said several times, it's been really refreshing for a lot of us, which I had no problem with any of the casting choices. I think everybody was cast quite well, and everybody did a really amazing job. One thing I will say, though, as far as the narrative goes, I wish Ares was someone else. Like, I wish it wasn't, what was it, Sir Franklin? I wish it wasn't him.
Sir Patrick.
Yeah. Sir Patrick.
Now, do you wish Ares was someone else, or do you wish the person who played Sir Patrick was a different actor?
No, I love that actor. I think he does a phenomenal job. He's a great actor, especially on the tower when they had their moment with each other and he kind of kept disappearing and it kept pushing the conversation forward.
That was great.
Was beautifully executed. I think that was really well done. But no, I think it would have been so much spicier because that was where they kind of derailed outside of the comic books.
Agreed.
They made their own narrative choices. They wrote their own story. And although I didn't necessarily see it coming, it was still not as shocking as, say, what if it were Dr. Poison, which I was honestly expecting, and it would have been more satisfying if it were her. For some reason, I really enjoyed the idea of a female, like, supervillain versus a female superhero. It would have been really cool.
Yeah.
Which there's still promise for that. Like, she didn't die. Dr. Poison is alive.
It's true.
So we might see that in the future, which would be amazing. But
she would have to live that long somehow. Not that there's not a way. I mean, she is a chemist. She understands the body pretty well.
Very true. Where do you think they're going to go with this? This going into...
It's going to be interesting because Justice League is the next time we see Wonder Woman. I'm a little disappointed that we don't get a solo Wonder Woman in contemporary time before that, because I want to see her go against some of her other rogues gallery before this other thing. And it's also funny, too, because I think similarly the weakest part of the movie, in my opinion, was the villain. Not necessarily, again, the actor, but there was something visually, he didn't have the presence of, like, the god of war. It was a little odd seeing a goofy mustache underneath that helmet. Little strange. And also just the fact that the final battle was a one-on-one slugfest, which is the most boring way to end a superhero movie.
It was very DC.
Yeah.
It was very DC.
That was where I thought things got just not off the rails, but weaker than I had hoped for.
Yeah, less satisfying than you would want for an ending of a film.
Totally.
Very big, tons of slow-mo, which that would be probably my biggest. Just why so many the fight.
That was my other one. Yeah.
The fight scenes weren't as crispy as I would have liked them to be. I think, especially in superhero films, they find it necessary to make it super special effecty and to do the slow-mo moments, which, in all honesty, it's absolutely beautiful. But after it's done the 300th time, we don't want to see it again. I think having more organic fights would have been a lot cooler. To see her like spar with somebody for a long time, actually fight with somebody, it would have been really nice. I think my favorite battle scene though was the beginning with the Amazon women.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I was ready for it. Once I saw that, I was like, okay, these action scenes are going to be amazing. But after that, I was like, okay, maybe not. It wasn't as exciting after that scene. Which, can we talk about Robin Wright? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
What? Oh my gosh. I need her to have her own standalone. Like, we need a backstory for Antiope. Is it Antiope? Antiope?
Oh man.
Antiope?
Antiope is it?
Yeah. We need a backstory for her. I need to know more about her. She's probably my favorite character.
She was a fascinating character because even in the comics, she started off as a rival to Diana. And then at some point they kind of rewrote her and made her like a part of the family and stuff. But yeah, she was awesome. Like all the Amazons were great. The fight scene was unbelievably choreographed. There were some lackluster CGI effects throughout the movie. Yeah. Generally when it was a person moving.
They weren't ready for it to do well.
Yeah.
Like, you could feel that budget was kind of lacking, which was disappointing, but I'm hoping in the next one it'll be ready.
Yeah. But I mean, some of those problems were in Batman v Superman too. It's just whatever issue DC's special effects studio has been having with animating people, it's been throughout the movies, whereas Marvel seems to have nailed that for the most part. It's still noticeable, but it's not as prominent as it is in a lot of these movies. But like the slow-mo, you had said, there are certain times where it seems very appropriate, where like she's blocking a bullet, just like one bullet, and you get that big like impact of it. But then like you have Hippolyta jumping off the horse and doing like the spin. Like that wasn't necessarily, that didn't need to be slow-mo at all.
I mean, that was really cool, but like save that for yourself. You don't have to put it in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't feel necessary at all.
She could have totally done that at normal speed and it would have been just as cool.
Yeah, almost maybe cooler because it would have felt real and organic, like she wasn't on strings. But yeah, no, you're right. I think they overdid the slow-mo. I think they're trying a little bit too hard on that one. Especially when she goes into, I think it was definitely appropriate when she's in the no man's land scene, which was probably the most emotional scene for me because I have never seen a woman, a strong symbol lead men into a battle. So that was very, very, very emotional for me. Both times I saw it, I got chills. I cried a little bit, just a little bit. Especially when I took my niece, I was like, see, this is a thing. Very important scene for me. And watching that unfold, I think that was appropriate for the slow-mo. Seeing her say, no, fuck you, Steve, and then just kind of go into it was really awesome. But then the slow-mo going into the village, the fight scenes, I think every fight scene she had was super slow-mode. Not necessary.
Although jumping out the window with that like flying knee, that was so clutch.
That was very cool, which that could have been cool. Like just that.
Yeah, if it was just that one thing, yeah.
So definitely, I think the fight scenes could have been worked on a little bit longer, but ultimately, and the film was really long, so it's not like they needed to add any time. So I'm a little confused as to why they made that choice, but
I think it's a visual thing that Snyder does that's just kind of carried over into the like the visual playbook of what DC movies have to look like.
Yeah, how they choose to edit it.
Yeah,
and that's fine. That's a choice. But from what I hear, a lot of people didn't like it. Slow-mos, so maybe they won't do it as much in the future.
They'll learn. They're figuring out how to course correct a little bit. I mean, this movie's evidence of that for sure.
Absolutely. What was your favorite part?
Okay, so there was obviously the battle on the island was great. I love the sequences through London and everything, but there are I cried at the movie at 3 places.
I want to know.
Okay,
you said that, and I love that.
So the one that I cry the most at is when obviously when Steve Trevor dies and she's screaming and all that stuff.
It's very intense.
When she looks at the photo of him at the end and touches it.
Oh.
That one. And then the one that got me, not the first time, but the second time, and I was not expecting it at all, is the first time she's in full costume when she steps onto No Man's Land.
Yeah. No, yeah,
I was not expecting that, and it hit me so hard the second time because it's the first time you see her as Wonder Woman full on in the movie, and it's such an act of selflessness in the sense that like she's been told how dangerous this is. This is something you don't do, but she's Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
So fuck that. Like you said, like just get out there. And the only thing that bums me out is the fact that we saw her in Batman v Superman already. And if this was the first time we ever saw the full Wonder Woman costume on screen, it would have had really so much more impact.
Yeah. And I hear in Batman v Superman, she didn't have a lot of dialogue.
No.
She was kind of a figure, which that's another reason why I didn't want to watch it, because I really didn't want to be disappointed.
She is the best part of that movie, though.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah.
I believe it. Oh, that's so sad. But no, I'm right there with you with that scene. My first time I saw it, it took me, like, it hit me so hard, like I was immediately like gushing. And then the second time it was a lot less because I was prepared. But my niece, what got me is my niece like grabbed my arm, and I could feel she felt that moment of like, oh, like it's her, like this is what we've been waiting for, and that was just like, I'm so glad I'm experiencing this moment with you right now. Like it's really important that you're seeing this. That was really, really amazing for me. Another favorite moment too, I think that hit me really hard emotionally was when it's right after the village battle, right after she takes down the tower, and she's speaking with Samir about what's his name, Charlie's the sharpshooter, about how he was having trouble, you know, how they were all talking about how great of a shooter he was, but he ultimately couldn't deliver in the end. And you can tell, obviously, it's because he has trouble continuing to kill people, which I think is really beautiful, because when you think about, especially here in America, we glorify especially our snipers, and we don't really think about how hard that is to kind of kill hundreds of people, like savagely, with one weapon hidden behind a mountain. They can't see you. I can only kind of fathom it in my head. I can only imagine what it would be like. And you can tell that, you know, Samir and her, they're talking about this, and she's kind of realizing, okay, all right. It's not necessarily as gray as good and evil anymore. And he has that moment where he says, we all have our battles, even you and I. And it just was like, oh, and I think maybe because it's like I'm in that time of my life where I'm kind of dealing with that, and it hit me for that reason. But I think it was really, really beautiful of them to include that. And even though it was kind of brushed over, and there were a lot of moments where I think they made some major opportunities to really deep dive into that subject. That kind of just, the story just kept going, and that kept progressing, even though they didn't continue on that.
And yet those moments are so important, because those are your character moments. Those are the things that DC has been lacking so far. That's why Superman is this unlikable emo whining guy. Like, we saw in the first Guardians movie, one of the most powerful scenes in that movie has no dialogue, and it's super fast. And it's when they show Rocket's back. And you see all the bolts and stuff, and you really get a sense of what he's had to go through. Yeah. And it's so fast, but it's one of the most important things in there. And a lot of the scenes in this were like that. A lot of those quick little conversations. Yeah. But they actually took the time to talk to each other, which is something they haven't been doing.
Exactly. And I think that's something that was so refreshing about this film, is there were so many really slow moments that they were just talking, and it was just about building the narrative, which, I mean, you know, I love narrative-based things, especially when they're really thick narratives. And I think this one is a lot more thick than they've ever tried to put on. Especially, there's another one that comes like right before they were getting to, I think, No Man's Land, and they were at the camp with the chief. And you first realize that Charlie has a really hard time sleeping, and that's when you learn that he sees ghosts. Yeah. And then they're talking. She's kind of coming to realization that, you know, like I was saying, everything's not so black and white. And she's talking to Chief, and he shares his insights about how, his people were slaughtered as well. And they look into that story of the Native American, which I don't think we really see ever, especially in American film. We avoid that hard, unless the whole film is based upon it. We avoid that conversation.
Yeah.
I think that was really well done. They didn't have to do that. They could have just had him there, and he didn't have to say anything, but they put that line in, and I think that was amazing as well.
There was a lot of those choices that I don't think not necessarily everybody understands as being as important as as impactful as they were, and really like humanize a lot of the characters, like those, like the terrors for Charlie and stuff. Like the scene in that same town, Veld or whatever it was called, after she destroys the tower and she's standing up there and everyone looks up at her and starts clapping. There's a detachment there where if they had left it at that scene, feels like something out of Man of Steel, where like he's constantly this godlike figure standing above them. But then in the very next scene, she's ground level shaking hands with all the people in the town. And that's so important, just regrounding her and bringing her back to humanity. Because if out of any one of the DC characters, especially in the Justice League, she's the one who reaches out to humanity in that way. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you're totally right on that. And they hit that hard in almost every scene that she had her. And I mean, it drives the narrative throughout the entire story. Something that I was really hung up on the first showing was just Steve Trevor and her and their relationship, and how that seemed to be the only thing that drove the story, that pushed the narrative. But once I saw it the second time, I was kind of there with you, where I could see, obviously this isn't just about Steve. This is about, her experiences that she's going through, and Steve so happens to be right next to her through these experiences. And because they're sharing that, they do create that connection and that deep relationship, especially at the end where she's kind of, Ares bounds her with that metal piece. And it's like that 1 minute of thinking she's maybe defeated, and of course we know she's not. And she looks over and she sees, which was so beautiful for me, which is another thing I want to touch on, is the possibility of a friendship versus the relationship with Steve Trevor. But she looks over at the squad, at Charlie, at Chief, at Samir, and you can see that face of like, no, like I can't let them die because of me. You can tell that she has that moment of I have to save them, and she's gaining that strength again. And then of course she looks up at the sky and sees that the airplane explodes, and that's like her last hurrah. That's her cherry on top, and she kind of freaks out, which was really awesome to see. Because I think a lot of people have problems with seeing, especially a female character, kind of lose her shit. Yeah. And she lost her shit, and that was like that scream and that like that facial, like that scene, that the whole thing that they did there, was really, really beautiful. And you showed me that video of Max. What was it? It was
Max Landis. Oh my God. Yes.
And I think his take on that ending was really amazing and beautiful, and what could have been a really deep way of twisting the end.
I'll link to the full video in the show notes, but for people that haven't seen it and that are just listening now, he basically goes on a thing where, like us, he feels that Ares was just kind of a slugfest fight, and it could have been so much better to watch Diana not just overpower but outthink him, because the ending that he suggested had maybe Ares as this bodiless entity that went into the bodies of people around her, so she would have to keep killing or knocking out all these people, and then realize what she's doing, and that she's feeding into exactly what Ares does. This is what he does. He makes people hurt each other. He makes people kill each other. And he was even starting to do that in what we did see when she lifts up the tank and was about to destroy Dr. Poison. When she does lose her shit, she basically is becoming everything that he wants her to be, and then goes against it in the end. But the thing that he really wrote that was kind of super smart, and maybe would have been a way that we could have had Dr. Poison last longer than just this time period, is if they had Ares jump into Dr. Poison's body at one point, and then early in the movie there was a part where Steve gets one of the gases that only paralyzes people and doesn't necessarily kill them. And they use that gas to then paralyze her, thereby trapping Ares instead of just destroying him. Yeah, trapping Ares inside of Dr. Poison's body as like a human prison, which is amazing.
So because my initial thought when she's having the conversation with Steve on the tower, and she's like, no, I killed Ludendorff. It's still happening. Why is it still happening? I killed him. He's gone. Ares is gone. And he has that serious conversation of maybe Ares isn't here. Maybe it's just men. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you too. That was so beautiful.
That's what I wanted. I wanted no Ares at that point.
Exactly. And it would have been so dark.
Yep.
But I think that's such a true representation of the Wonder Woman universe, especially in the New 52. It's such a dark place. And oh God, that's what I wanted too. But I mean, I see how hard that would have been to end the film.
Yeah.
With.
It's getting into a whole complex area.
Yeah. Would have been super deep. And I don't know if the general populace would be ready for that.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, that would have been absolutely beautiful. If Ares was in fact not the bad guy and Ludendorff, was, and Dr. Poison was a part of that, and how it was generally, it just came down to humanity. Because at the end, it was kind of far-fetched for me. At the end, when Ares dies, which we don't necessarily know.
Right, because he's a god and they can do whatever. It's a comic book.
Exactly. And we also don't necessarily know if Steve is dead. But essentially, she, kills him. And everybody, like both Nazi soldiers and, the chief and Charlie, they all kind of come out of this stupor, like they're under a trance. And the sun starts to rise, and there's this beautiful scene of everybody kind of getting along, which I think was kind of insensitive in my opinion.
I honestly agree, because if Ares is gone, we know this is World War I. We know World War II is going to happen. So what's the excuse that time?
Like, it's a thing. Like, we know it's a thing.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, and I guess that's what I took away at the end, is that Ares doesn't necessarily instill the evil, and I think that's what they tried to portray in his monologue during the whole fight scene, is that Ares doesn't necessarily instill the evil; he just enhances it. He just makes it worse for everybody, and I think it would have been so much more interesting if he just wasn't even there the whole time. But of course wouldn't have tied into the beginning of the movie and would have had to rearrange so many other things.
Sure.
But would have been really beautiful.
One of the things that I heard that was super interesting that I didn't really consider at the time was what they say several times throughout the movie, that it's about what you believe more so than anything. Steve has that conversation with her. Yeah. She brings it back up later on. And yeah. And one of the things that I had heard was there's that part where all the grenades or missiles or whatever go off around Diana, and she can't hear when Steve is telling her all this stuff. Like, and then they reveal it later that he's like, oh, I have to do this. I'm going to save today, but you're going to save the world. And he tells her he loves her and all that. The thing that I heard that I love, and I don't know if this was the intent of the movie, is that she didn't hear what he said. And that was what she believed and wanted him to say. And that's what fueled her, because that's what she believed. So that's in that moment of questioning what she was going to do. She fell back on her beliefs, and her beliefs showed her what she loved, and that Steve loved her, and that she loved him, and love won in that case because of those beliefs. That
would have been really, oh my God, that would have been so, if they did that, where we saw kind of her perspective, and he was, going into the sky with the plane, saw what he, and maybe they weren't really necessarily matching up. That would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh man, why don't we write this? Hi, DC. How are you?
Well, we don't need to write. We just need we need to see the first cut of the movie.
Just let us sit at the table.
Yeah.
Just let us sit at the table.
We need revisions and whatnot.
Oh man, I would have loved that. That would have been really. I think that's kind of the only thing that I'm, other than the technical issues, is the narrative lacked a little bit of depth. Especially, there were so many holes almost in every character where you could have gone deeper. Granted, it was a 2.5-hour film, but I think if you would have kind of taken some of those slow-mo scenes out, you could have added a little bit more narrative.
Sure.
So that was my major my major take back from the whole, because it was very DC. They set it up, they gave you your base, and they told you the story, which, by the way, I think the Themyscira, the island, Steve crashing, that was like to the T Wonder Woman.
Absolutely.
That was everything that you know Wonder Woman to be from her conception. So I think they did a really amazing job with that, especially representing the different types of women on the island. And also not even touching like the idea of them being like lesbian lovers at all. Not even kind of insinuating that.
I got the feel of that at one moment. One moment.
Too. The Robin Wright moment where
yes.
And then the screaming from
the last woman that runs over.
Yeah.
I had a feeling they meant more to each other. Just based on that.
Yeah, and I totally felt that too when she made that kind of wail. And I think that was a really beautiful directing choice. Thank you, Patty. We appreciate you. But ultimately, everything else, like, they didn't insinuate that there was, which, I mean, there's a whole entire fan base that dedicates their time to just that. So I'm glad that they didn't make that choice. And the fighting and just the general, I think those were the good fight scenes, was especially on the island. With the different types of weapons and the different builds of women and different colors, and it was just so good. So good. That was probably, for me, the best produced part of the film. Everything else, the narrative drove it, and I really kind of fell in love with it.
We do know that we're going to see Wonder Woman in Justice League, but let's say that doesn't exist for some reason. What is your ideal kind of situation for the sequel?
My ideal would be furthering into her story. I think obviously they had to tie in, the Bruce Wayne franchise DC Comics at the very beginning of the film. And you see that she's working at the Louvre, and she's like working in the antiquities department.
It seems like
working in the museum, which I think is super fitting for Wonder Woman.
Absolutely.
Like, she's this Lone Ranger who, like, I don't have any friends or anything, but I'm in my office, and it's like, it's a ballin' office. I'm a boss bitch. Like, she looks amazing in her clothing. Like, the clothing choices are amazing as well. And I think that was very well articulated, especially for the female audience. They didn't make her over-sexualized in any way, shape, or form.
I loved the joke about the glasses. Like, oh, you're going to put glasses on her, and all of a sudden that's going to make her not the most attractive woman in the world.
Which Etta was actually in the comics one of my favorite characters when I go back and look at like how they created Etta. And in the film, she wasn't executed very well. I mean, I think she served a purpose in the film, and she was great comic relief, but like in the comics, she's Wonder Woman's best friend. Right. And there was a lot more for that, I think, that could have been shown. And I think they could show that in the coming films. But of course, that was World War I. I'm assuming they were representing, the beginning of the film was modern day. Yeah. So I don't know how they would make that work. But yeah, I think I would want to see more Wonder Woman today and see what she's doing today in Paris. What is she doing in Paris? Like, what is she doing at that museum? Right. What is she up to? So I think, seeing that, working with one of her biggest enemies, Dr. Psycho, I think seeing what that would look like in the films as well, that would be really interesting.
The fan outcry has been Cheetah, and I'm like, she just beat the God of War. You wanted to fight Cheetah?
And I think what's awesome too about Dr. Psycho, when you look at, because there's so much backstory of the man who created Wonder Woman. William Marston was a man ahead of his time, and he had his own thing going on, but at the same time, he had a lot, as far as academia based, he had a lot going on. That's where a lot of his like superhero, I guess, what's the word?
Background, knowledge, expertise.
Yes, I guess so. No, his inspirations.
There you go.
So his inspirations were coming from the world around him. And I mean, ironically enough, he had a wife and also had a mistress, and pretty much believed that women were superior to men, which, I mean, makes sense as to why he would create Wonder Woman.
He's not wrong.
And essentially, he had crazy ideas about it all, but I was a huge supporter of feminism back in the 40s, and he worked for a man, a psychologist, who Dr. Psycho was based upon. And this man essentially thought that women were useless, that it was a waste of time. Yeah, to teach us anything. Why are we even learning? So Dr. Psycho being her main arch nemesis in the really interesting, especially now that I mean, a lot of people are talking about feminism. Some people are saying that this film was men versus women, which I don't think so
Not at all.
I think it was a really beautiful representation of equality. And like I said earlier, it wasn't a female superhero movie. It was a superhero movie. And that was executed, I think, finely. So to see modern day Dr. Psycho and see that translated based upon modern day, I guess, perceptions of equality versus men and women would be really cool.
That's fascinating.
I think it would push a lot of people's buttons and it would sell tickets like hell.
Yeah.
So I think they should do that. I think they should do that.
Well, I mean, they open the door up for so much now. Like we were saying before, like the female-led superhero movie, for it to be this big of a blockbuster and this big of a success. And I'm so happy that out of, as much as I am a hardcore Batman fan, there are no secrets about that. I'm so happy that the movie that kind of turned things around for them was Wonder Woman, because if this one failed the same way that the others did, I think it might have to, it would forcibly push them from a business perspective to think that it was the fault of a female-led superhero movie. Yeah, exactly.
And I know you're totally right, and it's going to go down in history as kind of saving the franchise. And I think you could see that they knew, like when they restarted, or not restarted, they recreated the beginning scene of the DC universe, that scene at the beginning of the film. What is it, like the small little intro that they have, the DC, that was a brand new introduction to the film. So it kind of felt like, all right, we're starting over. We're sorry. Here you go. That's
I wish that was the case. I really do.
So I'm hoping in the future they are going to make those choices, and continue to be, you know, whoever's whispering in their ear, take that advice, because it definitely showed some really beautiful. And as far as history goes, we're going to look back on this film and see what it's done. And kind of like we've done with Wonder Woman in general, a lot of people, there's tons of history and research on her and her symbolism, and how that symbolism kind of drove, you know, the suffragette movement and the women's liberation movement. And they think that she was kind of the missing link in those two. And I think, although I wish her film came out, you know, years ago, it's kind of the perfect time. And yeah, I'm just really happy that
it makes me that much more excited, not only for the future of the DC movies, hoping that they really look at this. I know Justice League is already filmed, but it is being, there are reshoots happening right now. Ooh. I can't say those are in response to Wonder Woman, but part of it is the fact that Snyder, for tragic reasons, unfortunately, had to step away from, I don't know if you heard about this. No. Oh, okay. Well, I won't get into the specifics of it, but it has to do with his family and something insanely tragic happening. And he's had to, even though the film has like initially shot the whole thing, there are reshoots going on right now with Joss Whedon at the helm. And that is because, so now we have the architect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe finishing up the Justice League movie. And not only that, but he is going, and I don't know if you've heard about this, is he is writing and directing a Batgirl movie at the moment for the DC universe as well.
See, and that's exactly, I think, the beauty of what this film has done, and its success. And thankfully, those who have written the really great reviews, because there have been some really awful reviews that they've gone back and retracted their review because of how much hate they got. But there have been some really amazing, like the New York Times wrote a really awesome review, Vulture wrote a really awesome review, and I think that's kind of what, you know, the Hollywood relies on, is that, because it gets people in the seats. And I think it's just the sky's the limit from here when it comes to inclusivity in especially comic book movies. You'll see Batgirl, you'll see hopefully like Miss Marvel. That would be really cool.
Oh, Miss Marvel's happening.
Is it happening?
Or not Miss Marvel, but Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel, yeah. Female Thor, like, is that going to be a thing that they do?
I think it's a possibility. I believe the Infinity War that's coming, the Marvel like big double part thing, like Chris Evans was only contractually obligated to do one of the two parts, and said in an interview that he agreed to do one more movie in the second part because it's going to kind of wrap everything up. So I think the intent is to kind of, because they can't keep these guys doing it forever.
Right.
They need to start moving, and they have modern iterations of some of these characters, like the Jane Foster Thor character, like there's the I can't think of her name. There's a black female who is taken over as Iron Man in a way. And now she has a different name though. Iron something. Iron. It's not Iron Maiden because that's that's too easy and possibly infringing on trademarks. But I can't remember what it. Yeah. So they have all these new versions of the characters. There's a new Hulk. There's Falcon as Captain America. So like they're possibly setting up all these things for like the next generation of the MCU.
Yeah. And that's going to be very beautiful. And I think Wonder Woman is kind of the head of that, and that she will be known as the I think the movie's success will be known as what kind of gave everybody else the okay to do it. Because I think people have been talking about this for a while. Batgirl has been talked about for a Catwoman, the redoing Catwoman, and not making it so garbage has been talked about for a while too.
Oh, there was another Catwoman movie. Let's just pretend there wasn't. As much as a Batman fan I am, I've never seen that movie. Refuse.
Oh my god.
Refuse.
So bad. It was so bad. I was so young when I saw it too. It was so bad. But I think they did it justice. And like I said, the first time I watched it, I was ready to hate it. And the second time, I think it resonated with me even more. And I can't wait to see what else they do.
Same.
I really can't.
Same. I think that's a good place to
follow the same. Yeah, call it.
Start wrapping it up.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've said pretty much everything I think we can say the movie, or we could go on for another hour or so. Believe it or not, it's been a while.
Has it been like an hour?
It's been a little over 50 minutes or so. But like we said, I absolutely love the movie. I recognize how important it is for society as in general, and not only that, but just Hollywood, because Hollywood seems to get stuck in these grooves of doing the same thing over and over, and it's nice to see them taking a chance like this.
Despicable Me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, more, because we need more minions all the time,
right?
Everywhere. But yeah, Wonder Woman was great. I'm glad you liked it and that it lived up to your expectations. And
hopefully, if you're watching, you saw it already.
Hopefully. Well, yeah, based on all the spoilers we just went over. Hopefully you've seen it. Yeah.
And if you've already watched it, go watch it again.
Because why not? It needs all the money it can get just to make it as big a success as possible.
Exactly.
Cool.
I mean,
so
it's been leading for a while now, so.
It has, and it will probably go for a while longer. I have no doubt. I don't see anything dethroning it anytime soon.
Yeah.
So as we are wrapping it up, what can we plug for you? Where can people check you out?
Right. I am a person.
You're a person.
I'm a person. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taudriel. Hopefully by the time this is posted, I'm back to streaming my regular stream. Also on Twitter, you can follow me at Taudriel Gaming, and on Instagram and Snapchat at Taudriel Gaming as well. Snapchat's my new favorite thing.
Is it now?
It is. I have a lot of fun on Snapchat.
Oh boy.
It's probably like out of all of the ones I just listed, I would say that one, Snapchat is the best.
Wow.
So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. For everything else we do, you can go to thegeekgeneration.com. If you use iTunes, please rate the show and write a review. We always appreciate those. You can watch live podcasts, cooking, and gaming at twitch.tv/thegeekgeneration. Follow at Geek Generation on Twitter and support the show by going to thegeekgeneration.com/support. You can send your emails to podcast@thegeekgeneration.com and tell us how much you also loved Wonder Woman. And as always, the show theme is provided by Machine Supremacy. A link to their site can also be found on our site. Todd, thank you so much for joining me this week. This was so much fun.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yes, I loved it.
And we'll have you back for some stream talk too in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be here.
Thank you.
Make it so.